And away we go. Hello, I'm Adrian, and welcome to the first episode of Big Tones Church of Truth podcast with none other than the man himself, Big Tones, and me, Adrian, or aka the Chosen Son,
Chosen son for
the
sure.
Chosen Son in the lexicon of Big Tones Church of Truth. Dad, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, mate, for an old bloke. Yeah, I think it's going to be a wonderful journey. Um, this old bloke having a chat to his son about all sorts of things.
It's a real sign of the times that we're now, instead of just having normal conversations, we're having a podcast instead. So that's a real sign of the times.
It's a bit different to when I first started growing up. Yes, no phones, no internet. Oh, gee
Things have
whiz.
changed over time. So
Yeah, and I think for the better. I think it's making the world a lot closer and a lot more understanding if it's taken the right way.
well, I guess to kick off, why are we doing this? Now, I will take credit for it.
I think you should take enormous credit for it because you actually gave me a big kick up the bum to get off my proverbial old backside and start doing something after being down the rabbit hole for so long and wondering what it was I was going to do with all this knowledge. Yeah, so
And
I thank you for that. Yeah.
and so I guess to explain to anyone listening, the purpose of this is that Dad has, sorry, Big Tones. I think it's weird to call you Tones,
I
but
no, I think you just call me
let's,
Dad. It's fine.
I'll try it. Tones.
No,
Dad,
doesn't
that
work.
sounds better.
No.
Uh, Dad has done an immense amount of research over the years into all manner of subjects about how the world works, and a lot of these are a bit more alternative views than what most people know. So it's not stuff from mainstream media. Typically, it's things that are exploring different views on how the world works. And I see all of the books and all of the insights that has, and the way that you talk to people, and that people's minds can become open for that. And knowing that you have all this knowledge and that typically works best when you talk through it, the idea of this is that we can just have a conversation and start touching on some of those themes, hopefully surface some things that others might find helpful or useful or interesting. And that's really it. The Big Tones Church of Truth as a name. You want to give us a bit of a background on that?
It just came to me.
In a vision?
And no, I didn't have a come to Jesus moment, if that's what you're talking about. But no, it just came to me, and I think over the coming episodes of this, the irony of it being called Big Tones Church of Truth will become pretty prevalent. So, and by the way, I will not be asking for donations on a plate. Uh,
Yeah,
so.
we do not yet have tax exempt status. I think,
I have been thinking about doing that because if Hillsong got it, maybe I can.
yeah, we may need to expand the congregation before we get to that. So before
Our
we do,
foundation members get special treatment.
yes, join now to be a foundational member.
Join now. Yeah.
So that kicking us off,
Yep.
how did you get started down this path of looking into alternate views on things? So most people, we typically take what we've been given for the most
Yep.
part. People live their lives. What changed for you? Were you ever just like accepting things as they were? And then what changed for you to lead you down this path?
I read two books in the 70s. One by called Worlds in Collision by Emmanuel Velikovsky, and another book called Chariots of God by Eric von Daniken. It was the second book that really got me thinking. So I would have been about like 23, 24, I guess. And it was him proposing an alternative view of how human beings have evolved. And basically, he was talking about the intervention of ancient aliens into various parts of the world. And that sort of like stuck in my head for a very long time. But then nothing really developed for me on this particular theme for some time because life comes along. I met your mother, finished my uh, degree, career, kids, you and Kira, and life just goes on. But it wasn't until um, 1999, 2000, I was having a massage every Saturday with a lady, and she just opened me down the course of some spiritual, we'll call it spiritual awakening. It's a hackneyed word at times, but it was a real thing for me, and it just opened up a new world to me of looking at different things in the spiritual realm. And you and I have talked about lucid dreaming and clairvoyance and mediums and all that sort of different world. And books just kept on flooding into me. I was doing a lot of travel at the time, and I'm at airports and I'm just, oh my God, there's that book. I better have that. I better have that. And so I've got a whole section on that world. We'll call it that world. But then it was in around about that same time, two books came into me, and one was called I just looked at here, Clash of Civilizations by Samuel P. Huntington, and he was talking about the different ways in which the world operates and civilizations, and that he thought that there was time going to be a clash of those civilizations. And this is in the year 2000 that I read it. And he was talking about some things that are happening now about the clash of religions in what we're seeing now, Islam and Judaism and Christianity and different cultures, or the Chinese are taking a big prominence. And this is in 2000 he was putting this forward. The other one was a book called Blowback by Chalmers Johnson. And he was basically saying, if you, America, keep beating up the Muslim world, and this book was in 2000, I think it was. No, it was earlier than that. Hang on. Yes, it's late in the mid-1990s. And he was saying, if you, America, keep beating up the Muslim world, at some point there's going to be a blowback. And so those two books. But the book that really got me going down, and we'll call it the rabbit hole, or if you want to take it, one of the most famous scenes in film history is the famous scene in the Matrix film, the red pill, blue pill moment. I'll come to that in a minute, but it was the book called Crossing the Rubicon by Michael Rupert in 2004.
What was it about that book specifically that?
Okay. So that's the one that sort of like went, what's this all about? And it was he was putting a premise that 9/11, the events of 9/11 were somewhat orchestrated to allow the Americans to get access to the oil in the Middle East, because there was a theory going around, still somewhat going around, called peak oil, that the world is running out of oil and America needed to seize control of more oil resources to keep it afloat, so to speak. We'll talk about that theory at another juncture, but the biggest point that was the red pill moment for me was he questioned the government narrative of how those buildings came down and the events of that day and the physical impossibilities and other things that occurred.
Was that just trying to understand like that penny drop moment, if it was that, or if it was the accumulation? But when you first heard that theory, did that strike an existing skepticism that you had about that? Or
very good question. I think I always had a bit of a question of questioning, or something within me to question authority. Not to ignore authority, but just to sort of always say, well, hang on a tick, why are you saying that, authority? You know, my bosses, and as a young man growing up in the career and all the way through, even teachers, I sort of like, and at university, and then, you know, getting my degree in accountancy, it was always, I always had that sort of thing in me, like, why? There's a curiosity to understand more. So when this Michael Rupert put this forward, I'm saying, hang on a tick, are you telling me that the government has lied to us?
Was that a surprise, that as an idea, or was that more
at that time, yeah, to the extent of that the degree of that possibility that might have that he might have been right.
It's quite a leap, isn't it, to go from more or less like believing authority has the best interests at heart to then, that stretch to assume 9/11 was an inside job, to use that language. I imagine that's quite a substantial leap for most people whose views, who haven't taken the red pill, for example.
Well,
Did you find it a big leap?
it was an incredible leap for me. It still is for many people, and I'm sure there are people listening to us right now, whenever they wish to join us, are going to say, "What the hell are you talking about, Tony?" Because I've studied the events of 9/11, and we'll come to conspiracy theory and what is a conspiracy theory, what have you, and yes, questioning what the government says is, that's a conspiracy theory, and such an event as that, it's like, you have got to be kidding. And I've had this discussion with so many different people about that, and it's called cognitive dissonance, and a part of how the mind operates. The mind can't deal with such the possibility that we have been lied to about such an event. 9/11 was, to me at that time, the awakening of, hang on, they're lied about us. I better research this. So my mind was open to it. And I've thought about this. What prompted me to, let's say, break down my worldview on that? That, yeah, I've trusted government, but surely they wouldn't do anything like that, as big as that. And so the cognitive dissonance aspect of how we view the world was broken for me in a big way. And I think it's important to look at that. And I know you and I have discussed this. I've had it for many times with people, is the red pill, blue pill scene in the Matrix. It's one of the most important scenes ever, where Neo's been living in the Matrix and he gets pulled out of it because he's believed to be the chosen one to help the resistance get out of it. And Morpheus is the leader of the resistance and says, well, Neo, you can take the blue pill and you go back into the Matrix, or you take the red pill and you come out of the Matrix, and you actually will understand what's happening around you. And then that which you see is really not, it's an illusion. It's a matrix. It's a computer simulation, or it's what have you. So that was the red pill moment for me. And that started me down the process, this is 2004, 2005, of going down this search, if you want to call it, for the truth. Or no one knows the absolute truth.
Yeah.
But unless I've got an alien sitting in front of me and I touch him and say, "G'day, mate, where are you from?" Unless I see that, yes, there are aliens out there, whatever. But unless you can absolutely see the hard cold evidence in front of you, we don't know. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I've just been down that path, and many different rabbit holes, many people putting forward silly ideas and what have you. So it's taken me all that time. So now 20 years now, been down this path. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is it's an interesting part of it as well, because the questioning aspect is one part, and then the core cognitive dissonance, that couldn't be possible because that challenges all my beliefs.
Correct.
I think
correct.
Those are the two things that can either lead someone to these paths or stop them from going down the paths, because when you are naturally, you question more and you're very curious, when the official story about something comes out, and then you're curious and you do a little bit of research, and then some things in it don't seem to make sense. And like, rather than say accepting the immediate answer you get from other people, like I'm speaking from experience here, where you come across information where it's like, I mean, we won't go deep on the September 11th stuff, but as an example, the World Trade Center 7 building collapsing, which didn't get hit by anything, and seeing it, like, to me, that was a real, that one really stuck with me, because I'm like, that just seems so implausible. And I remember as well, years and years later, when I was at the the museum in New York, the
Yes.
September 11 museum.
Yeah, we went there, right?
Oh no, that when I went there was with
Oh, okay.
with
Okay.
some friends, but there's no mention of that building in the whole museum. When I was there, I didn't see it mentioned once,
Well,
which is
there was a 9/11 commission.
yeah,
I've read the report. It's quite a thick report. And I mean, that in itself was a cover-up.
Yeah.
Story for another day. There's not one mention of Building 7 in it.
And without going too deep in this specific thing, I think
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make here is that when the questioning mind encounters things that don't make sense, it asks more questions. And you end up going further down and then often start seeing other plausible theories. And it's when you start seeing things that start stacking up and going, oh, that seems like pretty plausible from my reasoning. That's very different to what has been sold. That's that point, I think, where it's either if you accept it, you're like, this could be true. There's a big cognitive dissonance because you're like, holy shit.
Exactly right.
And that is that's a red pill moment. And I feel often that's the barrier a lot of the time, is that people might get close and go, I'm good, actually. You know, I'm happy with things the way they are.
Well, I think there's the mindset, which is, you know, I've got an established worldview and I accept things. Then when you're confronted with something which your mind questions it, and then the next step is, do I really want to go down this path?
Yeah.
Because if I start going down this path, what am I going to find out? And you've been down it and I've been down it. I mean, there's a lot of negativity in it. But the other thing, which is a major factor which prevents people from spending the time, is time.
Yeah.
It's time, and people wake up in the morning, particularly these days, and they just, you know, they're struggling to get their bills paid. You know, they just want to make sure the kids get their good schooling, and they're doing all the right things at school, at work, and looking after the kids and what have you, and to have the time, the energy, the curiosity to go down that is a big road to go down. It's a big path to decide to go down. But even when you put your toes in that water, what you find is negativity. And you and I have discussed about negativity. And but the curious mind, and I think that's a part of one of the objectives here, is to be able to explain things to people in a simple way so that they don't have to spend a whole heap of time going down it. It's not all negative, by the way. You and I have got a whole heap of topics that we're going to go down, which are very, very interesting. Not just conspiracy theory stuff, but it's how the mind works. Is you and I want to talk about that a lot, you know?
I think a good way to sum that up is, then we'll move on to the next subject, is it's the harsh truth or the comforting light. And sometimes
yep.
And again, not saying it's all true or it's all lie. There's the truth is a gradient a lot of times, but sometimes it's nicer not to know exactly how the sausage is made. Put it that way.
No, I know, and it's I did have a question to ask you. If you remember some years ago, you were sort of saying to me, Dad, you know, a lot of the world that you live in, there's a lot of negativity, and sort of what difference are you going to make? You're not going to change the world. And I said, oh, well, I've got 20 guys on my, which I have, I've got 20 guys. I'm not sure if they all listen to me or read my groups, but a lot of them do.
They're looking for the unsubscribe button still.
Yes. I've been doing this with these guys for 4 or 5 years. It started with 2, it's now 20 or whatever. And talking to a lot of them, they said, oh, I didn't know that. I really appreciate it. And I know that they do. It's not all deep, dark stuff. There's a lot of funny stuff and what have you, but it's also trying to get their mind to think about things differently. But I have feedback from them, and they've passed on a lot of the information and thought process and my views to their family, their friends. And I just call it throwing the pebble in the pond. There's a little ripple that happens. But years ago, you had a discussion with me, said, "Oh, Dad, I don't feel like going down this path. I've sort of hit a roadblock. I've got other things happening. It's a bit negative." But something's changed in you too, as well, to sort of open your mind up and sort of start researching and doing a lot of this as well. So there's something that changed. The reason I'm asking that is people can change. They shouldn't be locked into things.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll infer, it wasn't the exact question, but I'll kind of infer what you were getting at there. Was I had been interested in that sort of stuff for quite a while, naturally through some of the things that you brought to my attention, and go in and out in terms of the amount that I was reading or into it. But one thing that can happen as you go down these paths is you, again, to use that crude analogy, how the sausage is made, when you start seeing some of these things and you realize that it's like, oh, that's pretty messed up. Like a lot of the truth, if you want to call it that, or some of the stuff that's actually going on, it's pretty dark, and it's not, it's interesting, and it's good to know how you have what's actually happening. But I think there's two outcomes of that. Number one is a certain feeling of powerlessness, because so much of it, it's like you can't really do anything about it. And that there's this feeling then of like, okay, what am I actually going to do? And the other one is just from a day-to-day basis, the more time you spend on specific aspects of these things, it can be kind of negative, and it does mess with your mood. So I think for me, what changed was, number one, I got rid of Facebook. That was a pivotal shift.
I don't know. We're calling the people looking at this, viewers, churchgoers. We're not subscribing fully that you should get rid of Facebook, but I know what you mean.
I'm just saying that. So that was like during COVID, right?
Yep.
And the whole thing is, especially during that time, which was very negative as it was just such a time suck, because that wasn't actual research. That wasn't me doing it with intent. That was me being hooked by the algorithm into debating with people, going back and forth online, which is just a pointless waste of time. So I think the change was that, apart from that, it's just a bit more of a sense of separating the emotion from it.
Yes.
And for me, I started looking at things more. So just for background for anyone, is for work, and like one of my primary interests is human behavior and understanding human behavior.
Yes, absolutely.
So the lens that I view all this stuff through and my work is very much based on using communication to influence human behavior. So
I've got a quote here. I've got to read it a bit later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the lens of it, understanding it from a practitioner perspective, is interesting, and that's why, especially, I know we'll get to it about like propaganda and how to influence people, because it's very fascinating about how it is actually used and how it shapes people, which I think is a good segue to the core theme of this, is the worldview. I know it's a term you've used a few times already. So what is a worldview, and why is it important for us to talk about?
Everyone has a way in which they look at that which is going around them, how they receive images, how they receive inputs, how they respond to it. From the moment we are born, we are being shaped to view the world. And every single person has got a different way in which they view the world. And what the world being your relationships with other people, your career choices, your friends' choices, the way you look at a politician, a businessman making a statement, what's happening in the world around you. Everyone has a different lens, you use world or viewpoint. So to me, it was important to try and understand how people come to that worldview, because and then how does it change? I mean, I changed my worldview of that, that the red pill moment, and other people can, other people don't. And that's fine. I perfectly get it. But what shapes a worldview? And that's the nature-nurture aspect. And the nature, I call them determinative fundamentals. If you don't mind, I just got a list of them here. Who were your parents? Genetics. What was their background? What do their genes have that are going to pass on to you? Genetics, physical health, mental health. Where were they born? Were they born poor? Rich? Have you been raised rich? Do you have any siblings? Were you the firstborn, middleborn, lastborn? All these things impact upon that. Your physical environment. Were you born in a slum, ghetto, suburban house, an apartment? Were you loved? Nurtured by your parents? Cared for? Were you beaten up, neglected, ignored? Were you physically and emotionally abused? Your education. Were you able to get good education, mediocre education? You got in a bad crowd? All of these things. Were you raised in a religious environment? Hindu, Judaic, Christian, Mormon, Episcopalian, Muslim? How did you form your belief systems? All of these inputs were coming in. What type of person are you? Even as children, it's clear that some are naturally born adventurous. I call them the tree climbers. We know them. Then there's other people say, I don't want to go anywhere near that tree. It's too high. I'll sit back and I'll see what's going to happen before I make a decision. So I just call them determinative fundamentals. And then there's what I call consequential and developmental elements. Just growing up, just living, experiencing life. Emotional baggage. People get psychosis. You get impacted by different events that happen to you. You get sacked. You lose friends for whatever reason. You get forced to move around. All of these things go into, and that's basically your nature-nurture.
Yeah. So the reason that we're talking about it, the worldview, to, I suppose, give my take on it, is that not often are we actually considering the way that we see things. I think that
correct, absolutely correct.
For the most part, especially when we're young, the younger we are, we just assume that everyone sees the world like we do.
Yes.
Until time goes on and we get a bit more experience and talk to more people, and we wonder what's wrong with them because they don't they don't agree and they don't get what's so blatantly true. And over time and with self-awareness, you start to realize that exactly what you're going through there, that people's, let's just for simplicity's sake say, genetics and their natural factors, that's part of it. But then how they grew up, where they grew up, what those influences were, all of that shapes how they see the world. So if someone has grown up in a maybe a poor environment, is a minority, and they've had to encounter racism or being persecuted by police, then that's going to completely influence the view they would have on police. So if you're from a upper class white suburban area, you might have very different views of police because you have very different experiences over time. And I think the reason we're talking about this is because understanding that but at a very basic level, we don't all have the same worldview. The next layer to that is where what I think is incredibly fascinating as well, is that you can almost view it like it's like concentric circles. So the ones we've spoken about so far at the core, they're like the smallest circle.
Yes.
And then they get bigger. So it's kind of the natural factors and then the early upbringing factors. That next layer then is the cultural and societal factors, where what are those cultural beliefs that you've been born into? What's normal in the environment you're in? All of those things start shaping us too, and that includes the media, the books, the messages, or the education system. And that's where we start getting into the interesting part, because all of those things, as we will demonstrate over the course of these episodes, there's been deliberate choices about what is shown and what is not shown in order to influence and manipulate people's view.
100%.
And what's your view on that?
I think I think you've got to understand from hang on, I'm just trying to, how did I come to even think about this worldview concept? Like, was to actually think about me and like what has been the influences to shape me in the way I look at the world, and why did I take that red pill? Eight out of 10 people don't want to. They just don't have the time, or all that sort of stuff. But why did I go down that path? And then it's been developing over some time as this, and I think I've been feeding a lot off the work that you do in your job, and looking at human behaviour, is to try and understand that and in this initial episode, maybe the next one, is that we need to establish how the mind works and how you do view the world, and what is it that I'm going to use the word powers that be, very sophisticated, use their understanding of how the mind works to establish narratives for their benefit, and over time, that's what I'd like to do, is to establish the way in which, firstly, how you and I can understand how the mind works, but then more to understand the manipulation by governments and bureaucrats and what have you to get the masses, the groups, to go along with it. And then by doing that, we can then establish an understanding of that, to bring in all these other topics that we want to talk about. If you want to talk about conspiracy theories, well, then a lot of times there are conspiracy theories, but a lot of times they're not. So yeah, no, I and the other one was, how do people access inputs? There's soft inputs, there's hard inputs. Like you can be sitting in a discussion and talking to someone, and you subconsciously are listening to it and it's going in, but the mind will still sort of think about it. Other times you're sort of like, oh yeah, that's right, I'll do a follow-up on that. That interests me. So there are soft inputs, and there are also hard questions that you put out there yourself. And then what are you going to do with it? Is it going to be follow up on that, or no? Or no, I don't want to do that. No, but oh yeah, I'll do that. Even if it's something to do with, I don't know, you're having an issue with your child or something. So I want to find more something about what's going on with him or her. So you go and do some more inquiries about it. Yeah.
There's a fantastic book by two psychologists. I think, excuse me if I get their exact role wrong. But Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, the book's called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And essentially what it outlines is that the way that human mind works, we have two systems of making meaning and making sense of things. One is through fast shorthand or shortcuts, approximations.
Yeah.
And then the other is more thorough, rigorous, logical analysis. The issue is that most of us think that we're making logical analysis for most of our decisions. But for the most part, we're making these shorthand decisions. So as an example of one of these we call heuristic, which is like a shortcut, more expensive equals better. That's something that we all kind of, we know that 80%, generally speaking, we could attribute that if the price is higher, it's probably going to be better. And that's something that, let's say you're choosing wine for the most part, you'll kind of get a sense of, oh, the more expensive ones are going to be better.
Yeah.
The less expensive ones aren't going to be as good. There's all sorts of these things about how we make these snap judgments. And the interesting thing is that for those looking to influence people, understanding those and how the mind works helps you appeal to the subconscious and appeal to the impulsive unconscious mind rather than the rational mind. And that's essentially what most advertising has been. Like a lot of this advertising is they sell through symbols and emotions because you can bypass. Then they throw in some support.
And repetitive nature.
Yeah, well. The repetition of it makes it sink in. And in a societal environment, there's a lot of these things that we're not aware of that we just pick up subconsciously as to what the norm is because we want to fit in. So we just kind of go, oh, okay, that's the norm here. So for me, an interesting layer of the whole worldview thing is there's two sides of it in terms of the mind. It's the subconscious, the fast emotional reactions, which we often then justify to ourselves with logic. And for instance, as an example I used to use in workshops when I was trying to explain the difference between features and benefits. Let's say I'm selling a stereo, right? I'm selling you a stereo, Dad. I've got you in the shop and, get your favorite music on. I put you in the room. I paint the picture for you. I paint the picture of you sitting there with a nice glass of red, listening to it. Imagine how good it's going to be. And you're sold, you're feeling great. You love it. It's a little more expensive than you had planned, but you're like, no, this is great. And you get it. And you go home to mum. And then maybe it's like, I don't know, $2,000 on stereo. I was like, why did you spend $2,000 on stereo? The why is when you need the features. It's when you need because it's got a 10-inch subwoofer and it's got XYZ, and that's not why you bought it, but you need to justify it to yourself with the logic.
Absolutely. And this is marketing and advertising, they're using this all the time, have been using it for a very long time. Actually, I watched the documentary today about mind control. It was very interesting. I didn't get much out of it that I wasn't kind of aware of, but there was this just reinforcement of how strong the subconscious mind is over the conscious mind, and how the advertising and marketing and the powers that be use that to sell things as well. And so the subconscious mind is doing things a lot greater pace than what the conscious mind is doing. And it's being used.
There is just before you move on from that, there is this another analogy for that called the elephant and the rider. And the idea is like you picture a man or woman or whatever riding an elephant. The conscious rational mind is the rider.
Yes.
The elephant is the subconscious. So
so that's the analogy to.
So both of them work in tandem.
And the subconscious mind at that time is receiving all this stuff, and it's being manipulated, if you want to call it, can be manipulated, has been manipulated, and is being manipulated. And those forces that are happening within your mind, the subconscious mind, come out to buy that TV or that's whatever,
And I would, maybe this is going a little bit off, but I think it's important to touch on, because in my experience, a lot of my research in all this has been very much through the lens of human behavior and communication. So I started at uni doing philosophy, which I found fascinating, and then started getting into something called neuro-linguistic programming. So it's like philosophy, psychology, the mind, and marketing, sales. So all of these sorts of things about how to use communication. Number one, understanding something like that.
Yeah.
Number one, how the mind works, and then also how to use that knowledge in order to influence people. So that's kind of the lens of my experience. But over time, that expands from being like in here, one person, say the other motivation is to understand my own behavior. That's
correct.
The core one, the biggest one.
Yep.
But then it moves then to groups. All right, well, how do people behave in a small group? And then how do people behave in a big group, like a society? And that's when you start getting into propaganda and narratives and media. And that is, to me, I think a core belief that people sometimes, it's like a resistance they sometimes have, less so now, when we start talking about different theories. They don't expect or accept or acknowledge that people are actively influencing masses of people, and they have a very strong intent to do so. And it's been going on for a long time. This is not a crazy conspiracy. This is absolutely done. You have a quote that you want to share?
I do, because I think we've got to this, and we're talking about propaganda. This is from a book in 1928. I'm going to read two pieces from it that I was looking through this morning, and you've read it. You know the book. It's Propaganda by Edward Bernays, who's probably been recognised as the godfather of modern day marketing advertising. But he got
godfather of PR, and then
of PR and then advertising and all that. But he learnt a lot from Walter Lippmann. But
he's also the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
It says a lot, doesn't it? Right. So this is his first paragraph. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organised habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. To think that in. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds moulded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. Okay, this is in 1928. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organised. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. So basically, there's a group of people telling us what to do. So this is
just add a little more context to that quote as well for anyone listening. This is not some random person analyzing this from the outside. He is one of the all-time best practitioners of this. He's credited with starting at his previous book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, and I can go through some examples of campaigns that he did.
Well, just do that. Just do that before I go on to the next one.
So very, very quickly, one that stands out in my memory, and obviously he's very old, well, he's dead now, but this was during, so basically he was working with tobacco companies, and one of the issues they had then was that it was only men that were smoking. And obviously that's only half the market. There's a huge market unavailable there. And it was positioned as a very masculine thing. And the cigarette companies wanted to, obviously they wanted to access the female market. So what he did was during a suffragette parade, so essentially, women's independence, getting the vote. He had orchestrated some plants, so all women within the march. I think they were legitimately there. He'd orchestrated for them right at the opportune moment when all of the photographers were there, who he, obviously seated with the media to be there at that time. That they would all be smoking cigarettes as an act of rebellion. because you can't keep us down. And then the headline seeded to the all the newspapers was torches of freedom.
Yes,
And
I remember.
It's
Yes.
it's such a, I mean, for me, it's brilliant in its in its strategic execution, questionable in its morality, but the reason for illustrating that is just to show that, I mean, this was a long time ago, and this has been something for a long. This is obviously just for a company or an industry, but that same approach is being used from governments to influence people. Anytime you need to influence groups of people, because as he puts out there, function of democratic society, the currency of power, arguably in democratic society, is still votes. And assuming it's not corrupt, votes matter. So therefore, the better you are able to influence people on what to do, the more you can influence society and achieve your goals.
Well, he was part of the campaign in, I think Lippmann was part of a campaign to get America into the First World War, where they vilified call them the Huns. And so there was this, so they were able to create that narrative, and he admits it, you know. But I think, just going on to tobacco, I think I read somewhere where he became anti-tobacco later in his life, which is very interesting. This other quote, which I know, so the question naturally arose: if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it? And you put those two together, and then this is in 1928, and he admits that he was doing stuff before then, and then after that.
I mean, he wrote a book. He's written
he
two books
admits to it all. It's sort of like,
he goes through examples, like in Crystallizing Public Opinion, he explains a bunch of case studies of projects that he's done and how he would do it. So again, the reason to just bring that up is because I think, and it's less so now, I feel like after COVID especially, people are a lot more suspicious of the narrative that we're being sold. It's become a lot more common now to kind of not trust what we're hearing compared to years ago, which is a good thing in some ways, because people are a bit more skeptical, because they've seen that there's a lot of bullshit out there. And to make a point of that, the bullshit isn't only coming from mainstream sources. The bullshit is coming from everywhere. Everyone's trying to influence others. And I think another definition he uses for propaganda, which I think is a great summary, and I don't want propaganda to make you think just wartime stuff, but propaganda is very general, but it's a vivid oversimplification of an emotionally potent fact. I think something like this. So propaganda is incredibly simplified. So it doesn't engage the rational mind. It's basically us versus them. It's like, they're bad, you know, we're good.
Correct.
You know, you have no money. It's because of that. It's very rudimentary.
If you're not with us, you're against us.
Everything's very binary, and
yes,
that's part of the reason why it's dangerous, is because it pits people against each other into groups. And again, the reason just to bring all that up is because, which will lead me to my next question, is we have a reactive, or a lot of people have a reactive, people have a reaction when they hear something that is different to their current worldview, and have perspectives of, oh no, that's not happening. So we ask that a little more open mind, and being aware of that is key. My next question to you, Dad: are you a conspiracy theorist?
100,000 million%.
What is a conspiracy theorist?
Someone who doesn't believe the government. who okay, I'm being a bit flippant there. The questioning mind says, well, hang on a tick, let me just come back. going down this path, I don't believe the government. I think that we've been lied to for the powers that be for so many years, and they've used their power, their knowledge, their station above us to put out repeatedly messages that we, the government, know more than you do. And when we make decisions on anything, we've got a collective of people here, and we're doing it in your best interest. Okay, and so we'll call it the government, if you want to call it that, the bureaucrats, their worldview is that we are right all the time. Everything we do and everything we're doing is for your best interest. And for anyone to question us is that we're not doing it in the best interest, because you elected us to do that in a democratic society. And I'm just talking within the Western world at the moment. How dare you sit back and sort of say, oh, don't you question us? Whereas the conspiracy theorist, I'll come to how that term developed in a minute, is one that says, well, hang on a tick. Okay, you say that, but there's some evidence out here which I'm looking at, and it's not, and some of the evidence is actually from your own documents. It's from your own mouths. It's from freedom of information that's come out. It's from whistleblowers, insiders. It's from experts, not government-appointed experts, but other experts who are saying, well, no, or people on the ground in war-torn areas who are actually interviewing people and actually getting stuff out. And that all of that, we'll call it evidence, which is contrary to the official narrative, is what I look at. And you know, I'm not saying everything I've looked at is over the 20 years has been correct. Absolutely not. But I've been able to do a filtering process to determine what that evidence is. So to me, a conspiracy theorist is, let me just say, the term conspiracy theorist was created in the modern era by the CIA after there are people questioning the events of the JFK assassination, basically saying the Warren Commission comes out and says it was Lee Harvey Oswald, and he fired one bullet, or a couple of bullets, but only one bullet went through the back of JFK's head, took a detour and took another detour, and went through John Connolly, governor of Texas, his leg, and ended up there. So the Warren Commission is a single bullet theory. So, but then other evidence that came out said, well, no, that's not possible, right? And so the CIA sent out a memo to a whole heap of media, and the media is very complicit in so much of this, then and now, even more so. Here's the CIA sent out, use the word conspiracy theorist. And they sent out a way in which they were able to, I've got a paper on that as well.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, that's where it started from. It's been used by governments from then, governments and anyone to say, question events, always a conspiracy theorist. So the media said, or immediately the term conspiracy theorist has the same connotation as a Holocaust denier. You don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah.
I think that there is some leap between them in terms of gravity, but I get
but the connotation is the same.
And I want to touch on a few things there. Number one is that that's true. And again, because you can imagine, like what you were just saying, like the CIA invented the term. There's a natural thing that people will go, oh yeah, CIA invented it, or crazy conspiracy theorist. It's like there's
inherently within that there's a conspiracy theory.
Exactly. There's declassified documents from the CIA records that essentially say, yeah,
I got it here.
That's what they did.
Correct.
Again, to put the communication lens on it, because this is, and I will say again, because for me, viewing this from two lenses, right? So I'm always looking at this as like, what's actually going on? There's that part of me I want to know. But then there's also the practitioner
Yes.
perspective, where
Yes.
I look at the strategy of what they're doing.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
Yep.
so to maybe weigh in with that perspective here, because I see this same strategy at work a lot, and it's very effective. When you put a term, let's say at the moment, it's like if you have theories that are different to what is the commonly accepted view, and they're a little bit like, you know, the government is doing shady stuff, for example, people will say, oh, you conspiracy theorist. What that does is that the word conspiracy theory, and this is the strategy, essentially you have a term or a symbol or whatever, and that word has a lot of associations that come to mind instantly. So I guarantee when I say conspiracy theorist, everyone listening, you're going to think of someone with a tinfoil hat.
Correct.
And there's a reason for that. It's because that's been programmed to be the kooky, crazy person on the other side. So what happens is that everyone gets tarred with the same brush. So instead of addressing the facts and addressing someone's perspective and the individual argument, you label them this, and then they get lumped in with the admittedly there are crazy people who are like, who have some wacky theories with no substance. But what it does is it enables you to deflect any legitimate
Correct.
concerns by labeling them something else. And the same strategy has been used in terms of, you see it online where people will just call someone a fascist or a bigot or a homophobe. And it's like instantly these terms are all charged with a lot of emotion and a lot of negative image. And as soon as you've been slapped with the label, it's no longer about the substance of what you're saying.
Correct.
And one final one to say on that before we can move on. Anti-vaxxer is another perfect example, because there is a big difference, and I don't want to go into COVID, but just because I think
For another day.
Another day. There is a big difference to questioning the COVID vaccine, which was very different. And the circumstance, the context was, there was a whole lot of stuff going on, which we'll get into another stage. That's very different than someone just going, I don't want to take any vaccines ever because I'm patently against it. But by saying anti-vaxxer, you're labeling them as a group, and therefore you dismiss any rational argument. So that
I personally experienced that.
Yeah.
Because I made a to me at the time a very well researched from experts other than government experts and I made the choice. I said, no, I'm not going to take the COVID vaccine. Reasons are for another day. But I was immediately labelled anti-vaxxer, but I support nearly all the vaccines that have been in modern medicine. Modern medicine has saved my life. Modern medicine has saved billions of people over here that have caught it. And of course modern vaccines have. I have no doubt about that. But I'm just supporting me being the recipient of the term anti-vaxxer. I've also been the recipient of nutcase conspiracy theorist as well.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
It's very effective. And
it's very effective.
And that's why, again, there is, as much as I look at these things with a disgust because it's not truthful and genuine, from a strategic perspective, I can admire its effectiveness because it arms the average person with the ability to feel superior.
Absolutely.
And
yes,
right.
Very good point. Very good point.
Without having to acknowledge or you don't have to engage rationally anymore. You can just...
Well, you don't have to ask the conspiracy theorist anti-vaxxer, what research in this, that's another, what research, it doesn't matter.
Because you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, or you don't know what you're talking about. And that's another point I have to make on this. And in having discussions with a lot of people on different topics, I say, well, can I ask you what inputs you have to come to your view, your opinion? And I won't go into the topics, but in having a discussion on a particular topic, and this is a perfect example of with a gentleman, and it was okay, I'm going to say the topic was about the possibility of man-made global warming, right? And I said, oh, so what are the inputs that you've come to on AGW, anthropogenic global warming? And he said, what's AGW? What's anthropogenic global warming? I said, well, anthropogenic is the word used for man-made global warming. Anyway, I said, well, what, and this is an important point on inputs, right? So what inputs have you made to come to the fact that it's man-made global warming? But before we do that, I said, look, what's your background? He said, oh, I'm an industrial chemist. So, okay, high, presumably high intelligence and whatever. Oh, well, I've driven around Australia for the last 25 years and I've seen things change. Okay. So what books do you read on this topic? What books have you read on it? Oh, none. I said, what media do you listen to? Oh, the ABC, and I read the Sydney Morning Herald. Okay, so that's it. Yeah, I don't need any more. I said, well, I've read a whole heap of books on both sides of the story. I've watched documentaries on both sides of the story, articles, and I've been down this rabbit hole on this on the AGW for 10 years. And I said, I think the narrative that we're being told is questionable. Would you like me to send you some of this stuff? No, not interested. And it's just like, I see this so often, is that and this is someone who has got the time to do it. It's just this inputs, like what are the inputs that are making people make decisions? And this is an intelligent, mature man, and I thought, I can't have a discussion with this person. He's not the only one that was on that topic. I've had same response with so many different people on different topics where they just close to it. Now, is that cognitive dissonance again?
You know what I think it is? A big part of this. It's an outcome of the strategy which is discussed. Because what that does, by labeling people as a certain thing and then attaching negativity and an unfavorable perception to those images, it creates a fear of people to take an alternate view because they will get called that. And then people might think that they are then, oh, so you're a climate change denier.
Yeah.
But it's true, because there are certain subjects that if you bring up a different perspective, people get kind of very defensive about it. And then there's often a reflex term that they can throw onto you. And then I think there's a social impact of taking the red pill or at least adopting these views separate to the content itself.
Well, I agree, and I think I don't know how we're going for time and how you're going for time, but I think that we will talk about a bit more is group dynamics and groupthink. And
that's definitely another episode.
That's a whole episode.
That's a whole series itself.
I actually watched this documentary today, the Ash Experiment. Have you heard of that?
What is it?
It's an Ash experiment, and it's a famous experiment where I'll send you the link to it, and it's where 7 people come into a room. 6 of them are actors. 1 of them is the actual test subject, and what's put up in front of them are 1 line here, and there are 3 different lines of different one. So there's, hang on a sec. So there's 1 line here, and then there are 3 lines to the other side of the paper. On the 3 lines, there is 1 line which is the same height as this line here. When asked to match up the lines, the test subject says, oh, it's 1 and 3. All the others say, no, it's 1 and 2. So after the 3rd round of this, the test subject says, agrees every single time with what the group says.
Yep. Yeah. And
they've done this test repeatedly.
I think it's a perfect point to end on, and potentially a jump off point for a future subject, because that, to me, and once we get into a lot more specifics of different views and research that we've done, the reason we go through this is because it is important to understand that there is this social dynamic that we don't want to be the one that stands out. We want to belong. We don't want to be the weirdo conspiracy theorist tinfoil hat wearing
No,
person.
no,
And
exactly.
but you know, if that's what if that's where your mind takes you or where the truth is, you often have to accept that you won't believe the same thing as everyone else.
It's I assure you, it takes a strong mind, it takes a strong will to do what I've done. In what I mean by that is not just the physical nature of it, but to sit down with people knowing that they look at me, you know, for a long period of time, they look at me and say, oh, there's Big Tone over there. Oh, he's a conspiracy theory nutcase. Yeah, like, you know, whatever. Sorry, I swore. So, you know, whatever comes out of his mouth, don't believe. He's one of those tinfoil hat guys, right? Yeah, well, a lot of what I said 10 years ago is now coming to fruition, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of it, and so many people do, and I think it's I know you and I have just been doing a little bit of work on groupthink, and it takes you know, to walk into a room knowing that I'm not part of a group, or that I am part of a group and I'm not quite in it. And it's a very, very powerful tool for those that wish to sell products as well. You know, you know, that's part of a marketing strategy. You've got to be part of this group, like you know, you're going to be, to be cool, you've got to be part of this group.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing within social media at the moment. The influencers and anyone stepping out of line, you're going to get thrown out of the group. So,
well, and it's so hard not to respond to that, because there's one just minor thing I want to put on, but we'll dive into it deeper another time. One of the big reasons for it is it's much easier to influence a group than it is to influence individuals, which is why when you can get people to identify as a group, you only have to influence the group idea, and then people, if they go against that, they risk being isolated. So they will typically adopt the same mindset as the group. So again, strategically expedient. But I think we'll probably wrap it up there for the inaugural episode of Big Tone's Church of
just
Truth.
one thing. I just want a little section called Big Tone's Did You Know?
Oh, okay. I'm curious. What have we got?
Why are women's buttons on one side of the shirt and men's are on the other side?
I think I know. Well, I thought I heard that once. I'll tell you my thought.
Oh, you got an inside running on this, I think.
No, because I had this conversation the other week with someone. I don't know where I heard it. It could have.
I tell you, I know where you heard it.
From you.
No, go on.
So my understanding was that because women in the past had like a maid that, or whatever they call it, the chambermaid that would dress them. So it's easier to have the buttons on the other side.
And the men?
Dress themselves.
No.
And they're all right-handed. I don't know.
Okay, you got, I tell you what, you got part of this because Mum talked to you a bit about it. So women, after the invention of the button was in the 13th or 14th century, the buttons were available to the wealthy, as most things, the new things are available to the wealthy, but the women's attire needed a lot of buttons. So the women got dressed by their maids, by whatever they're not, chambermaids, whatever. And mostly people were right-handed, so the ladies' buttons were on the right-hand side. Hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on, I've got to check.
Yeah.
No, the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Left-hand side. Yeah. So that's
yeah.
And then so that's why, and why it still stay the same now, no one knows. But in the men's was basically from when the buttons came in for the military. So if their saber was on this side, or their knife or their pistol, it was easier to get in or undo the button and get their knife. So but this is not the trivia episode. This is just.
I like it. Big Tone's Search of Truth. Did you know? That will conclude today's episode. Thank you, everyone.
Adrian, are we going to be able to attach some articles?
Yes, we'll be able to attach things
Okay.
when we post this. So
Okay.
till next time. Peace out.
Welcome viewers, and see you next time. Thanks, mate. And thanks for getting this started. It's been wonderful. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to opening people's minds and having our chats together as well.